Well, good morning. It is morning still. And welcome to the. Who are we? What are we doing? Welcome to the Cyber Agony Uncles for December. It's nearly Christmas, isn't it, Rich?
Oh, it really is. It's finally here.
Yay! I'm looking forward to it. I like Christmas. I know a lot of people don't, but
Oh
there we
no, I
go.
love it.
I do. I love it. I think it's super. So yes, I'm Stephen Ridgway.
And I'm Rich Benfield. So, shall we
So
jump
go on.
straight in? Yeah, last one of the year. Let's jump straight in with the question.
Yeah,
And
go
the
on, Rich.
question
What's the
is
question?
as follows. Uh, Loving the show, fellas. I could really use some advice. I was head of cybersecurity at a fairly well-known company, but I was made redundant earlier this year. Now here I am staring down Christmas, and I've been out of work for almost 7 months. I'm getting lots of interviews for CISO roles and head of cyber positions, but recruiters keep telling me the competition for these roles in the UK is fierce. I've not been able to land anything, and I'm starting to feel pretty stuck. In brackets, it says, I'm so glad this is anonymous, by the way. So here's the thing, I don't want to go into consultancy. Working for myself would be too much pressure, and I thrive in large professional environments. I spoke to a career coach who told me to know my worth and not compromise on salary or my career aspirations. But now I'm wondering if that's bad advice. Should I let go of chasing CISO or head of cyber titles for now and apply for any role I can get? I'm not technical enough to pivot to something like architecture or penetration testing, and my GRC skills are a bit rusty. Could this be why I'm struggling? I don't even know where to start. What should I do? And that's from Down in the Dumps.
That's okay. That's going to be an interesting one. I'm. Do you know what? I'm probably not the best placed to give advice on that one, because I think for almost my entire career, I've been headhunted from one role to the next. So I think probably the last time I just applied on the open market for a role and got a role would have been when I was a junior administrator in the last century. So let me see. Don't know. Rich, what do you think?
Okay, so everything I've read on LinkedIn, on Reddit, everywhere you name it, where there's a community of people, everybody's saying that it's a really tough market out there for changing jobs, um, um, dealing with dodgy recruiters, bad processes, that ghost jobs. The end to end, apparently the whole system is falling over. Um, so I get it. I can see it. I can appreciate that it's really tough right now. The other thing is that the CISO role's really badly defined on the whole.
Oh yeah, that's true.
CTO and CIO roles, they're fairly clear.
Yeah,
Still not as clear as your traditional COO, CFO, CEO type roles, but they are clearer than the CISO role. And that role, therefore, varies wildly from organization to organization. And it says in the question that the GRC skills are a bit rusty. I would imagine that that's a fairly common thread amongst most CISO vacancies. The other thing to bear in mind is that some companies, when they put up job adverts for CISOs, they don't really want a CISO. When you look
yeah,
at the job spec,
yeah,
they often just want some mid-level, either cybersecurity manager um,
yeah.
or sort of a cybersecurity engineer. So it really is a case of your mileage may vary.
That, yeah, I would very much agree with that. I mean, CISO can mean anything from team lead all the way up to a proper, C level, on the executive committee type role, and so you've got to pick them carefully. I think what's interesting in this is that this particular person is getting to interview and then not getting role. So getting lots of interviews, even for CISO roles and head of cyber positions, but is clearly not actually landing the roles. I mean, when we're saying lots, let's be honest, over a 7-month period, at the most that's going to be, half a dozen or so roles, because these are senior roles and they don't come up that often. But it doesn't mean that the issue isn't I'm getting no interviews, which is quite a different problem. So I'm going to make an assumption that this person's experience looks good on paper.
Yeah.
Okay. Now,
With that.
you look good on paper. You've got through that, because that's the most difficult bit, in my personal opinion. The hardest bit is, if you're applying for these sorts of roles, they're almost definitely filtered out by recruiters, filtered out by HR, and you don't get to get in front of the recruiting manager. Now, somebody recruiting for a CISO role is going to be a board member one way or another, or a senior exec one way or another. So you don't get to have your CV in front of people like that unless you've kind of passed those first two gates. So whatever's on that CV ticks the box for CISO type roles. Also, then, as you've got as far as the recruiting manager or the recruiting senior leader in the organisation, they're not going to be a specialist in your field, are they? So, because by the time you get to the C type roles, your peers have got specializations. They know enough to know whether you're going to be a good in role or not, or have a good feel for whether you've got the aptitude or not. But they're not actually going to be able to drill you particularly hard on the core technical aspects of your role. And I mean that not in a technical as in IT technical. I mean like the functional, shall we say, aspects of your role. So something's going wrong when this particular person is sat in the room going through the interview process. Now, the two areas that I can think of that may be problematic in that space, and the first one is fairly fundamental, and the second one I think is addressable. But the fairly fundamental one is that the CV and reality don't align.
Yeah.
So if you've got a load of stuff that is great on the CV, but the moment somebody prods you, and we're talking about somebody here who doesn't know your subject anything like as well as you do, when they prod you on this stuff, it's not clear that what you've actually done that aligns to that particular entry on your CV. So the impression then rapidly becomes this person is quite frankly chancing it. They don't really know what they're doing. Thank you, but we won't progress any further. Okay, so that one is the solution to that is either carry on until you can blag your way through it, which I wouldn't recommend, but a lot of people do, or go and realign your CV with what your actual experiences are, and then look for roles that match with the level that you're actually working at. So back to the know your worth piece. Well, maybe you're worth, bluntly, maybe you're not worth as much as you think you are. There we go. Yeah, so that's kind of like, well, it's like, if nobody's telling you this stuff, you're going to find yourself out of work for 7 months and very frustrated.
Yeah,
So
I mean, we are here for the truth.
yeah, absolutely. I mean, I don't know who this person is at all. I mean, this has come through via the normal channel, so we don't know who this is. We're glad that they're enjoying the show. Sorry, but if the issue is you've oversold yourself on your CV, then take a look at that. The other side of it is then, generally, when you've got as far as an interview for a role, certainly a role at that level, you're not being interviewed on functional ability.
No.
Primarily, you're not being interviewed on functional ability. There'll be a little bit just to test the water to see if whether can you talk intelligently about the stuff that you've put on your CV, because most of the answers you give are going to go over the heads of the people that are interviewing you, which will probably be a fellow C-level exec of some sort plus HR, and they might bring somebody ahead of in, but probably not, to be honest. Most organizations. So what you're actually being interviewed for is fit in the organization. Now, if you're being rejected because there's a feeling that you don't fit, that probably means that you're not applying for roles in organizations that match with how you come across personally when you're sat in front of somebody in an interview situation. So this particular person says that how do they word it? They don't want consultancy because they thrive in large professional environments. Well, okay, that's fine. And some certain people do particularly thrive in those environments. But if you're looking for a large organization, it's a very specific set of cultural fit that you need to align with when you're looking for C-level roles.
Yeah,
That
absolutely.
depends very much on the organization. Somebody who's a good fit at JP Morgan may not be a good fit at the NHS.
Yeah,
Do you see what I mean?
yeah, and you're not necessarily looking to fit in the organization so much as you're looking to fit in with your peers on the board. So, assuming that it's a proper board level role, you can expect to be interviewed by other C-level execs. Now, they're not going to know the functional ins and outs of your job, but they will have a common thread running between all of them at that level. And that is, well, actually, it's twofold. One is around strategy, and the other is around delivering business value, because that's the level at which they're working. If you get bogged down talking about firewalls, SOC services, and all sorts of things, then you're talking the wrong thing to the wrong audience. So you need to be able to demonstrate how you will add value to the business, how you will, I don't know, you can mention things like risk and whatnot, obviously. But really, if you're talking to board members, you need to be having a board level conversation.
Yeah, I very much agree with that. I think the ability to, I mean, we've gone over this over the last year in various Agony Uncles, but the ability to talk to people outside of cyber or technology in language that they actually understand is really, really important. And it mostly is in our arena is mostly talking about business risk, or how do you leverage security for improved customer engagement and sales. So if you're in an industry which is notoriously bad at doing security, to be able to talk to clients around, well, actually, you're better off with us than you are with the competitors, because look, we've put a lot more effort into this. You're going to be safer from a supply chain perspective, whatever it might be. That's about as far as it goes. So it's kind of risk mitigation plus is there anything that can be leveraged in the market around that? Those are financial discussions. They're not technical discussions.
Yeah, exactly. And it wouldn't hurt you to bone up on some financial terminology,
Yeah, absolutely.
EBITDAs and things like that, and so that you can actually speak their language. Just
Yeah.
just thinking about it, there's some elements of MBA courses
Yep.
that You can pick up some free resources online to help bone up on some of that. Because yes, you absolutely need to be having a senior level conversation with senior level people, regardless of what your CV says. Oh, and speaking of your CV, don't pad it. I would rather see a CV that was 100% honest, that didn't meet all of the criteria, than see a list of accomplishments that a team of people did with no mention of your own input. I don't
Yeah.
want to see padding. I'd rather have the absolute bare truth of the matter.
I very much agree with that. The key to a CV is to be able to talk about the outcomes from
Yeah,
particular. What outcomes did I drive within that particular organisation? And that, I mean, we're talking at a senior level here. It's a bit different
yeah,
if you're lower in the organisation, but if you're looking at sort of managerial or leadership roles one way or another, it needs to be, well, especially at this sort of level, what you're really talking about is, did I get a strategy approved? Um, why was that the right strategy for the organization? What did I do off the back of having the strategy approved, and was that successful or not? And it's actually, I think, okay to have in there things that didn't go well, and to be able to talk about why you didn't get the outcomes that you expected, and how you would perhaps go about things differently, or how did you modify what you were doing in order to end up with the right outcome for the business, even if it wasn't the outcome that you originally expected. So I think there's a whole raft of stuff in that space, but you need to be able to talk about it as well as write it down. To say that yes, you had an approved strategy for cybersecurity and migration to the cloud, and £4.5 million budget of this, that, and the other, and a team of 60 people or whatever it may be.
yeah,
That's all well and good, but if somebody comes along to you and says, well, okay, what were the business outcomes that how did the business improve as a consequence of giving you £4.5 million and approving your strategy? And if your answer is kind of vague, it's not going to go down well.
yeah. I mean, did you achieve or help to achieve X% uplift in sales, or have you got some other metrics? Throw some
Absolutely, yeah,
metrics in there. At a senior level, we want to know the outcome,
yeah.
and having definitive numbers or percentages or some kind of metric attached to that really helps tell the story. And in interviews, we want to hear your giant slaying or your dragon slaying stories. We want to hear about the amazing things you've achieved, but we need to be able to pin our hat on a few facts around these outcomes. So there is an interview technique called SMART, isn't there?
Yeah,
Which
there is.
stands
Yeah.
for something like specific, measurable, achievable, relevant, and
Oh,
time bound.
isn't that targets?
Yeah, quite possibly, but I've seen it
I
in
think this,
using
yeah,
in
but
context of
there's a lot of
interviews.
very applicable stuff there. I mean, basically,
Mm.
scenario, action, outcome is a good way to
Yeah,
respond, I think, to questions. And if the interviewer is any good, they'll give you open questions that allow you to come up with the scenario, to elucidate on the scenario what actions you took, and what those outcomes were. Um, so there's
yeah,
lots of opportunities there. I mean, it is all down to, does is there some substance behind the CV? So once you've got past that CV bit, getting to the interview technique, there's loads of stuff around interview technique out there.
yeah, absolutely, and most of it's true. The other thing to consider, of course, is how are you handling your interviews? Are you turning up on time? Are you dressed smartly? Because at that level you should be, even if it is remote. Are you dead nervous? Are you completely calm? Have you done enough research on the company? All the standard interview stuff that high achieving people would, all the steps they would take essentially to prepare for an interview. Are you doing all of those, or do you get behind your laptop after freshly booting up and it's still starting up and you're a bag of nerves and all of that? Um, a C-suite leader is cool and calm in the face of pressure, ideally. So are you coming across that way? Are you remembering to breathe, to speak slowly and calmly? Because you're working in security, and effectively you're selling yourself to a customer. You know, so you have to come across in such a way that you are seen as being knowledgeable and a safe pair of hands. And that's in addition to all the um, stories about adding value and your great achievements. You have to be the complete package at that level.
Yeah, I agree. Yeah, I very much agree. There's one thing that I've seen done that is surprisingly effective if you can pull it off, and that's to start the interview with all the things that you know you can't do.
Oh,
So
that's
there will be a
interesting.
job. There will be a job description there of some kind, which will undoubtedly have a whole load of requirements for the role in there. Now, almost no organizations do that stuff well. Um, you end up with statements like must have 10 years experience of X, must have this qualification, must have blah, blah, blah. But if you really pushed the recruiting managers or recruiting leaders about this stuff, they actually don't care about the detail. What they're looking for is that's an indicator of ability and experience. It's not a prereq. So if they say must have 10 years experience of working at sea level, and you've got somebody with 9.5 years experience, do you really care? Well, the answer is almost definitely no. Actually, I don't really care if they're good. I don't care. Well, don't put it there. On the job description. So you often find yourself, well, when I say often, it's possible to find yourself in a situation where there's a bunch of stuff that the the recruitment process has put in front of you as requirements, but probably isn't real requirement. So, and there's going to be stuff that you've done, stuff that you haven't done, for any organization. So, not specifically for this role, but let's just say as an example, if you were going for a role in cyber, if they say must have 5 years experience of ArcSight, well, what if you've got 5 years experience of Splunk?
Yeah.
Does it really matter what the tool was, or are you looking for somebody who knows how to triage and whatever it might be? So you can go in and say, okay, these are the 5 things. Actually, that's not me. Okay, if these things really matter to you, if these are the make or break parts of this recruitment process, then I'll thank you for your time, but let's call it a day now and get an hour back.
Yeah.
Um, the other side of it is you can then say, well, if they're not critical but they do matter, don't worry, I'll pick this stuff up in absolutely no time. Look at my CV. I've got a track record of being able to learn and adapt, and I bring all of these other transferable skills, which means that those won't be a problem for me. They, so long as you don't perceive them to be a problem. It's a very powerful technique. It's a little difficult to pull off.
Yeah, and that's just made me think of an interesting point. The person that's written in says that they're a bit technically rusty
Yeah,
in a couple of areas, and probably rightfully so if they've been operating at a senior enough level.
yeah,
Now, if when job hunting, they're looking at job ads that have a shopping list of tech products in there, desirable technical skills, I would suggest that that's probably an indicator that is screaming that they're not really after a true strategic CISO.
yeah.
So that's something to bear in mind. The other thing to bear in mind is that we don't know whether the person posing this question is male or female, and there's some ridiculous statistic somewhere, I don't know it off the top of my
Oh,
head, that says that men will
yeah,
apply for any job where they've got 50% or more of the skills, but for women they tend to be a lot more discerning about it, and will only apply for jobs where they have a much higher percentage of the required skills in their list.
yeah. That's yeah. I've seen those stats. The stats kind of vary a little, but the concept behind it, I think, is
Mm.
probably true. So yeah, it is. Yes, it is possible. Actually, yeah, you've kind of raised an interesting point there. If you are rusty in, let's say, your technical skills, but your CV talks about things that you did 5 years ago, 6, 10 years ago, from the perspective of being technical, it is quite possible that you may find yourself in the interview being picked up on that stuff as that first round of just prod a little bit about technical ability or functional ability in the role. If the things you've put in the CV lead the interviewer to question you on things that you're then shaky on, think about whether you should really have them on the CV in that particular way. So it could be that actually perfectly good at aptitude and fit, perfectly okay. However, you've said on your CV things like, been responsible for network security, lots of including Wireshark traces and whatever it was. And you look at the role, and it was when you were reasonably junior 10 years ago, but it's on the CV. Now, if you put in the situation where there is somebody senior that isn't technical who's brought along a head of or a senior somebody or other just to make sure that you do know what you're talking about. If your senior security person then says, "Oh, tell me a little bit about how you've used Wireshark in order to identify compromise in that particular environment," and you go, "Oh, that was a long time ago now. Let me just have a think." They'll come out of the interview saying, "Well, regardless of anything else he said, actually he's got this load of this stuff on his CV about technical skills that actually are no longer relevant, or he can't remember, or he never did know." And you've only got to fall down on one or two little bits like that, and then probably somebody else is going to interview better and get the job.
Yeah, that's a really good point. I mean, how many of us over the years have just added a new job to the top of their CV
Yeah,
and
yeah,
not thought about what's beneath? You
yeah.
know, I dug out a really old computer the other day and found a CV that was 22 years old, something like that. And, it suddenly occurred to me that, there's a very strong chance that the jobs listed on there are probably still in exactly the same format with exactly the same
Yeah.
text in them on a current CV. If I was to dig one out, um, so yeah, absolutely. And a lot of people talk about tailoring a CV to the job, and I don't know if anyone really has time to do that anymore. If the job market's as tough as people say it is, there's something to be said for that. But equally, a lot of people would be forgiven for taking the scattergun approach and just firing a CV for every job ad they can find that suits their skills.
I mean,
So
it could that.
yeah,
I think when you're looking at jobs at this role, though, that shows.
yeah,
Sorry, when you're looking at roles at this level, I mean, that shows. If it's a
yeah,
generic CV, it's probably. But then we've got we kind of gone through the whole thing about the CV must look reasonable, or you wouldn't get the interviews.
yeah, true, true,
So,
yeah,
but as a generic point, if you're looking, if you are sending your CV out to agencies for CISO or sort of head of type roles, you do need to make sure that your CV is good, or you'll get filtered out in one of those first two gates.
yeah, absolutely. I mean, a lot of these exec headhunter type recruitment agencies, they deal with CVs of your caliber day in day out, so they will
Yeah.
be able to quickly filter out background noise, people that are slightly too junior. So it is key that your CV is on point, but not overly inflated or padded, because you will fall down in front of the person interviewing you.
Yeah, I agree. I think one me dropped off then, so sorry, I am back. The so the farmer at the end of the lane drove over the fibre again and squashed it. So,
Again,
I know it happens every time, doesn't it? Oh dear. Yeah. So I suppose the final thing that springs to mind is that if you're struggling with the interview side of things, um, and you're looking at roles which are at that level and are clearly well paid and so on and so forth, perhaps use one of these services that will assist you with interview techniques. So get some one-to-one coaching on how to interview at that level.
Yeah.
Just to get some practice in and get some feedback from a professional around maybe the way that you're answering questions doesn't work, maybe your CV and you don't line up very well, whatever it may be, and that's about the best you can do. And the rest of it is, like you say, you're being interviewed for fit in the organization more than anything else. You can improve your percentage chance of, or your probability of success by making sure you're applying for roles in organizations where you probably are a good fit. Other than that, it's just a numbers game.
Yeah. Oh, and one last word on the know your worth statement in the question. How the hell, and forgive me, but how the hell do you know your worth when the industry can't define the worth of a CISO? I mean,
And
I'll
and
leave
on
it
that
with the
point, that I think that's a very good point at which we can say we've probably covered as much as we can on this.
I think so. Thank you ever so much to everyone for listening.
Yeah, thank you all for listening. Hope you have a great Christmas. We'll be back in the new year.